What's up, everybody? Today we're going to be going through some of the biggest busts from 2025, the worst pick from every single round of 2025 fantasy football, going into the futures for 2026, rankings, tiers, all that good stuff. Feel free to stay tuned. That content will be coming very shortly as we wrap up the NFL postseason, NFL draft, and approaching the NFL offseason. So, going right into it, the worst pick from round one has got to be none other than Justin Jefferson. Was likely drafted as the overall third pick off your draft, maybe wide receiver one or two, depending on Jamar Chase. Going right after him, though, going into the season, it was Kevin O'Connell, Justin Jefferson. They're both QB proof in the sense that they just went into the season with Sam Darnold, no problem, and just dominated. However, I don't think people gave Sam Darnold not nearly enough credit. I was trying to say this before the season that I think people are discounting how good Sam Darnold really is. Did I think he was going to have the season he did this year? No, but I think he was much more capable than people believed before the season. And we went into the season with J.J. McCarthy, who was a flat-out disaster, really, and he derailed all of your Justin Jefferson stock. And there's only so much talent can do, but if you don't have a quarterback to really get you the ball, there's nothing that's going to save you. So Justin Jefferson with the conglomerate of Carson Wentz, J.J. McCarthy, even some Max Brosmer down the stretch. It was tough to watch, but he's still a top three wide receiver in the NFL as far as real-life talent. But going into 2026, I'll need to see a lot more confirmation that J.J. McCarthy's made some steps of improvement before ever touching him in the first or second round going forward. I expect him to be in that early third round range going into 2026, but for 25, he was an absolute disaster for round one, and then round two, following off of that, another wide receiver, finished as the wide receiver 44. Somehow worse than Justin Jefferson is Brian Thomas Jr. He was even at the end of the first round, so it was like an early second round pick. Just an overall disaster of a pick. You lit it on fire the second that you saw him in week one. It seemed that he was just scared to catch the ball. Any time in the middle of the field, it was just not good. He just was not making the routine plays that you come accustomed to seeing. Obviously, his biggest productive times the last year were with Mac Jones, and we figured that it would be no problem transitioning into Trevor Lawrence. And if I told you you finished at the wide receiver 44, you would have said that Trevor Lawrence had a terrible year, but it was just the complete opposite. Lawrence was amazing, and Brian Thomas Jr. was the one who was at fault for most of the kind of drops and missed connections here. It even forced them to bring in guys like Jacoby Myers, elevating Parker Washington, who dominated down the stretch. Despite Travis Hunter missing time, Brian Thomas Jr. can never really find his path into the wide receiver one glory that you thought you were going to be able to produce. Anytime you take a wide receiver in the early first round, late or first or second round of your fantasy drafts, you expect at bar none that you're just going to get at least some consistency, and that was just nowhere to be found. He found himself on waiver wires towards the end of the year. So back-to-back wide receivers, round 1 and 2, that really let you down. And in round 3, it's going to be a quarterback here as our cover photo. Lamar Jackson, woof of a year where the defense of Baltimore essentially did their part for fantasy. They were very bad. So you would suspect that Lamar would have a good year knowing that he has to put up all these points in order to stay in games. However, that's just not what happened. Lamar was terrible from the very, week 4. So weeks 1 through 3, I think he was still in the QB1, QB2, averaging 25 points, which you grow accustomed to. When you draft him in fantasy, you expect that he's just going to deliver for you, but he certainly did not. So they turned to other quarterbacks when he was missing time. Tyler Huntley looked good. There was just a lot going on. It felt like every practice week he was just missing time for another undisclosed injury, so all parts of his body were just not fully healthy throughout the whole year. So it'll be interesting to see next year if he's able to fully get healthy and the head coach that they bring in, maybe get a new offensive scheme in place, because they do have all the weapons they need. They just need to get healthy. So that starts with Lamar, but all the other playmakers in the offensive line, the defense needs to get healthy. And I think you could see him return, maybe get a slight discount in drafts in 2026. But for round 3, it was just certainly not it. And for round 4, it was Alvin Kamara. I argued with a lot of people before the season on this take that it's time to just pull the plug with Kamara. My reasoning was that he's washed and that this team was going to be terrible. However, it just appears that he was washed, and the team overall was actually way better for fantasy than I ever could have imagined. Tyler Shook came in and kind of breathed some life into this place. However, even when Kamara played, he was just not really effective on the ground or in the air. It was always supposed to be that he was the safe check down option. However, for some reason in 2025, he was anything but that, so very inconsistent on the ground as well. Devin Neal really came into the fold early in the year. Same with Kendre Miller came into the running back rotation. It was clear from early in the season that they wanted to work 2 running backs into the system, which is something that you didn't grow accustomed to in previous years, making Alvin Kamara just one of the worst picks this year. Going off of that is going to be Xavier Worthy. All the opportunity ahead of him with Rashee Rice suspended early in the year. You would have thought that Xavier Worthy was just going to take off, get right involved in this offense. They're throwing the ball number 1 pass rate over expectation. All good signs for measures of Xavier Worthy. Travis Kelce was balling early, but he just was not good at all. Early in the season, dislocated that shoulder, got him out for a few weeks, and then even when he came back, was nothing more like a gadget guy. So a lot of end arounds, which is kind of your main worry with Xavier Worthy, is that he was poised to be this breakout star because in the Super Bowl he was targeted like a wide receiver 1. In the offseason, they were saying that his route tree was going to get advanced, but times reverted back, and he finished as the wide receiver 54. Just a big letdown of a pick in round 5. Round 6, we got Calvin Ridley. This one's partly injury, partly not, because even when he was healthy, this offense didn't look good at all. Cam Ward, I think the jury's still out. I personally still think he's a good quarterback. So going forward, I think I'm in on Titans' weapons just because guys like Jameer, DK was good down the stretch. A.O. Manor was also good for periods of time. I think if you give Cam Ward enough weapons, he's going to be able to figure it out. This offense started to figure it out, specifically in the past 4 weeks or so. Cam Ward looked a lot more effective both in the air and using his legs. So going forward, it looks a little bit more promising. But Calvin Ridley, I mean, it was just a disaster. It felt like every week he was getting 1 or 2 catches. Struggled practice-wise, always in and out of lineups. But, I mean, when you drafted him, you thought that he could be the second coming of Terry McLaurin last year, taking the rookie quarterback. You hoped that he would be what Stephon Diggs was this year, but he was everything but that. Finishing at wide receiver 107 was a complete disaster, to say the least. Now, pivoting away from wide receivers and back into the running back room is going to be RB 101. That is Caleb Johnson. So, preseason day 2 pick, round 3 to the Steelers, coming out of Iowa. He was actually a very highly touted prospect. I liked Caleb Johnson coming out of college, but going into this offense, they just signed Jaylen Warren to a big extension before the season, and it was clear that Aaron Rodgers really just wanted to be with guys that he trusted, and that was Jaylen Warren and Kenneth Gainwell, and it was not Caleb Johnson. So he barely touched the field. There's not much I have to say other than that, because if I saw more tape or more kind of reps on the field, you can make the judgment on if he was actually a good pick or not. But he just simply wasn't on the field, so you probably cut ties after week 2 or so and send him to the waiver wire. And that's just kind of where he remained for the rest of the year. Unfortunate, but definitely a waste of a round 7 pick. Round 8 belongs to David Njoku. You're seeing a theme here where it's a lot of guys that were good the year before ended up being poorly. That's why I always like to say you got to predict what next year is going to bring. If you simply just take the guys that are highest ranked because that's how they finished the last year, you're not going to win. You have to be able to predict what's going to happen. Very rarely do you see guys have back-to-back top years. So you got to be able to predict which offenses are going to take this big leap going into 2026. And I think a lot of the Browns' weapons going into 2025 were very inflated just due to the fact that Jameis Winston was single-handedly carrying them to fantasy value. Him and Jerry Jeudy, bad picks, but Njoku in round 8, you thought that you're getting kind of a value tight end that you could start every week, but in week 2, you realized that you might just have the backup tight end on his own team, so hopefully you were able to pivot to Harold Fannin. He was a beast. The more of the yards after catch tight end really proved himself to be the Browns' best weapon going forward. However, David Njoku, just another bad pick, tight end 29. I hope he finds a new landing spot this offseason. He is a free agent, so that'll be interesting to see where he lands. I'm still kind of holding if you're in Dynasty. I think he still has a lot more juice left, more give in the tires. So going forward, I don't think it's anything to really worry about, but just a bad year all in all. In round 9, we got Matthew Golden, rookie wide receivers. That was the big theme from 2024. They were all good. For the most part this year, they were all bad. Matthew Golden, I wasn't the biggest fan as a prospect coming out of Texas. I think he was overdrafted. This was like a late second-round pick in my eyes, but he went first round to the Packers, which, yes, got people very excited. The only problem is that Jordan Love just loves to spread the ball around, and Matthew Golden simply isn't an X wide receiver that can just command targets like Christian Watson can. he's not going downfield and just mossing guys. It's more of these gadget close to the scrimmage line of scrimmage here for Matthew Golden. So I'm not very bullish going forward. I think this was a miss on their part for the draft. I think they're going to be building around Jaden Reed and Christian Watson going forward. So Matthew Golden at wide receiver 90 was certainly one of the worst picks of this year's draft. One of the guys that you went in thinking, oh, I have this new toy. He's going to be so great, and you probably held him for way too long, thinking the breakout was coming, but it just never came to fruition, making him the worst pick in round 9 and one of the worst of 2025. And capping us off is the offseason narrative king himself, Joe Mixon, where I don't know how many times people had to hear that he's still not practicing in OTAs and training camp, that people just kept drafting him. So he finds himself into this way because in round 10 there was lots of people that were still taking him just on the hopes of that he would come back. You wasted time. You probably wasted a bench spot to stash a rookie that could come into the fold. I know a lot of people just kind of cut ties as soon as they needed an IR spot open. But it was still a donation of a pick in round 10 for Joe Mixon. He never even played a snap, and there was never any news as well. So you're just in the lull of all the Houston Texans offense woes, but Joe Mixon was nowhere in sight. I don't know if he'll be back in 2026, but if he does, be cautious. Playing a whole year off of football is definitely concerning for me going into 2026. So it'll be something to monitor, but those were the 10 worst picks from every single round of 2025. Fantasy football going into 2026. Feel free to stay tuned, but that is going to do it for the video. Please subscribe if you can, if you watched all the way through. I really appreciate it, and peace.